A key theme for this exam is the importance and influence of leadership and individuals throughout the module. And we can see Pericles here addressing the Athenians at the Athenian Assembly. Now, before we start talking about this particular essay topic, it's probably quite useful to split the module into particular time zones, because if you get an essay question with no time frame, you've got to dip in and out of these time zones, whereas obviously if you get an essay question that focuses on a particular time frame, you've obviously got to stick to that. So I think you can actually split the module up into these following time frames. Obviously, you've got the Persian Wars, the Ionian Revolt, the Darius invasion, and then the Xerxes invasion, and that's obviously one distinct time frame. You could then look at the Delian League's transition to roughly the Athenian Empire, the formation of the Delian League, the Long Wars, the rise of Cimon, the early actions of the Delian League, so Aeon, Skyros, Charistus, Naxos, Eurymedon, Thassos, Megara's defection, the Battle of Tanagra in 457, the Egyptian campaign from 460 to 454, and then the subsequent movement of the treasury, the supposed peace of Callias. And then you're very much into the build-up of the Peloponnesian War itself. So the Sacred War, the disputes over Corcyra, Potidaea, and the Megarian Decree, the debate at Sparta and the Allied Congress. Then you can jump into time zone 4 and look at the start, the first phase of the Peloponnesian War, particularly the Archidamian War, with the plague and the death of Pericles, the different strategies used by both sides, Pylos, the capture of the Spartans, and then Brasidas' Thracian campaigns, the Peace of Nicias, and then the failure of the Peace of Nicias in the Battle of Mantinea. And then if you start with the Sicilian expedition, you can look at the final phase, which would be the Sicilian expedition and the Ionian War. So the failure of the Sicilian expedition, the occupation of Decelea, Athens being defeated in Sicily, the Treaty of Miletus, the key battles of the Ionian War, such as the battles of Abydos, Cyzicus, Notium, Argianusai, the execution of the Argianusai generals, and the Battle of Aigos Potami, which obviously then leads to the surrender of Athens in 404. So if you're not given a time frame, you've got to dip into these different sections. So essay question-wise, remember you've got the three modern historian debates. You'll get one of those, and then at the essay questions you've got a choice out of two, a 45-minute writing, and individuals is a good option for an essay question. Now remember, Thucydides is going to be our primary source of material, so do ensure that you're aware of Thucydides and how he's a reliable historian and how he's accurate, and you're able to apply this specifically to your examples that you're using. We're going to base this very brief revision clip on this question: how far did the changes in relations between Greek and non-Greek states depend upon the strength and abilities of the leaders of the states during this period? And as always, it's important to have a structure, have a link to sources, and to be able to analyze your sources. Now, if you look at a mark scheme, don't be thinking that you need to include absolutely everything in that mark scheme. So this one, if you notice, doesn't have a time frame, so we've got to dip into those different periods. So if we look at the mark scheme, we could jump into the Persian Wars and discuss a few of these figures. Themistocles, Miltiades, Xerxes, Darius, maybe Pausanias, and we can use Herodotus, Plutarch, and the Persian inscriptions for information here. We could then look at leaders after the Persian invasions. I would say the non-negotiables being Cimon and Pericles, but you might want to add in some Spartan figures there, using Thucydides and Plutarch and Aristotle maybe to supplement. The actual outbreak of the wars between Athens and Sparta, again, Pericles is going to be important, Archidamus, and then in regard to the actual wars themselves and the actual Peloponnesian War, some of your non-negotiables might just be sort of Cleon, it might be sort of Athenian figures like Nicias and Alcibiades, or Spartan figures such as Brasidas, Lysander, and Gylippus. So just a few examples about how you could structure this, but the important thing is you don't need to cover every single individual. You're looking at a range of individuals. So let's look at the Persian Wars. So Persian figures, I would say your key figures would be Darius and Xerxes, because it does give you the opportunity to use those inscriptions. So you could use the Darius inscription, which opposes it or contrasts the view of Darius as depicted by Herodotus, and same with Xerxes and the Gate of All Lands. That's particularly useful to counter the view of Xerxes in the way that he's illustrated with that argument and discussion with Artabanus about whether to invade Greece itself. You could talk about some of the failures and some of the successes of Xerxes, particularly the idea that he actually sacks and controls Athens, but then also he doesn't need to fight the Battle of Salamis, but yet does. So Xerxes and Darius certainly are really important to cover in terms of their aims and their objectives and how the sources view them. The Greek figures, certainly there's a range of figures that you could choose to talk about here, whether it's Miltiades and his actions at the Battle of Marathon as depicted by Herodotus and the strategies that the Athenians and the Plataeans use at that battle. Themistocles is probably got to be a non-negotiable in regard to the the Athenian navy rather, the creation of the Athenian navy, the Delphic oracle, the debate that he has with Eurybiades before Salamis, and then obviously the Battle of Salamis itself. And then if you've got time, you could weave in leaders like Leonidas, Pausanias at Plataea, and Aristides the Athenian. So who were they? Did they change relations? Were they a significant figure? Post-Persian Wars rather. I would say Pausanias and the idea that he turns the Ionians away from Spartan leadership is going to be important. Plus it gives you an opportunity to use Diodorus, Plutarch, and Thucydides. Cimone's going to be really effective here because he certainly has potentially a positive outlook towards Sparta and the Athenian allies up until his exile as a result of the revolt of Thassos and the idea of those Athenian troops being sent home in reaction to that Spartan Helot revolt. Pericles and the opposite view that Pericles has to Cimone in regard to Sparta, the Athenian allies, and also to a war on Persia is really effective as well. In regard to the outbreak of wars, Pericles, again, is going to be important because you can cover the relationship that he has with the allies, and you can evidence that with the Megarian decree with Aegina, and also the Corcyra debate as well, and the assault on Potidaea, and Pericles' rejection of the Spartan ultimatum. Archidamus and Sthenelaidas are particularly useful for what they say at the debate at Sparta. Sthenelaidas is the exam spec bit, and he is the aggressive ephor that really prompts the Spartans to vote for war. In relation to the changing relations during the Peloponnesian War, the Cleon-Brasidas rivalry is really useful. Both warmongers, you can talk about key events, and there's some great opportunity for source analysis here, particularly for Thucydides' relationship or views of Cleon and Brasidas and why he may have a negative view of Cleon because of his exile and Brasidas because of his capture of Amphipolis as well. So Cleon and Brasidas are pretty useful here. The failures of the Peace of Nicaeas, Alcibiades in promoting an Argos-Athens alliance, and then Alcibiades in persuading the Athenians to launch the Sicilian expedition, again, is some really good opportunity to develop an answer here. And you could also focus on those Spartan figures. Gylippus, I suppose, is useful for the Sicilian expedition, but Lysander's really great because he's the one that really does bring Sparta and Persia together through his friendship with Cyrus, and it gives you an opportunity to use some Xenophon there as well. So you can see that this question is again, it's doable. It's straightforward. It's all about structure, about linking to sources and detail, and it's all about structuring your answer, looking at some of those key individuals. Don't be overawed by thinking that you need to talk about all and every single individual that you that is on a particular mark scheme. You really do need to pick and choose here. But crucially, you do have to know your material. You've got to view the module as a menu, and then you have to select items from that menu that are useful in answering a particular essay question.